Let's do it. Let's make a pact right now. File our teeth down.
Keanu Reeves, which just
No.
Keanu Reeves is Harker. Like
Go ham.
go ham on Harker. Like, Louis, you're leaving me here, a child.
No. Welcome to Anthus Lavinthe Creations, where we are going to be talking about vampires through different forms of media today. Mostly, specifically, movies, not really books, because it's easier to rewatch a movie than it is to reread a book. That's what we're going to be doing today.
Sounds good.
So I feel like we might start with Donovan here, which, by the way, I'm Seph, I'm Anthus
Puck.
Lavinthe. This is Donovan!
That's me.
So, Donovan, you know a little bit about the history of the vampire. Do you wanna inform?
Well, something that is rather common when it comes to vampire myths throughout history is a lot of it centers around disease and the way that people kind of viewed it back then. It wasn't really understood how infection traveled from one person to another. Tuberculosis was a major factor, especially because when people started to get sick with tuberculosis, they would start to kind of waste away. Like they would lose weight, they would get pale, and they would start coughing up blood. And when somebody died, usually it wasn't long before somebody else in their community or their family got sick as well. And so people started thinking, what if somebody who died before is actually sucking the life out of people who are still alive? And so they would start to wonder, and so that would usually lead to a vote being called and somebody going to dig up this person. And a lot of the times they would look for things like, is there blood coming out of their mouth? Are they decomposed sufficiently? Does it look like their fingernails are growing? Things like that. And there were plenty of ways that people saw fit to deal with that situation. Eastern Europe, you see a lot of vampire scares happen around Romania and Hungary and places like that. And they would usually dig up the person, and they would try to, if they couldn't kill the vampire per se, they would try to stop it from hurting anyone else. And they could do that by either stuffing their mouth with garlic, putting a brick in their mouth. There was one body that was found in Italy, I think, where they just shoved a brick in this.
Where'd you hear about the brick one?
It came up in research. They just shoved a brick in this corpse's mouth and then just shut the coffin. Sometimes they would just flip the coffin over so the vampire couldn't get out. Seriously. And sometimes they would, drive a metal rod, through the chest. And I think that was more so meant to literally just nail the corpse to the ground so that it doesn't get back up.
So if this was during tuberculosis time, this was like late 1800s, early 1900s.
Tuberculosis outbreaks happened for centuries.
Plus, there's syphilis, which had very similar effects too.
That's true.
And the plague was connected to it as well.
Got consumption.
Yeah, consumption usually had to do with tuberculosis.
Yep.
But yeah, there were a lot of outbreaks in the 1800s, and so that's where you get things like the Great New England Vampire Panic, which some of you may have heard of, especially if you listen to lore.
We like lore here.
Very first episode is about the New England Vampire Panic, which was, I think, the 1890s.
And that was about Mercy Brown, right?
Mercy Brown was part of that, yeah. And they actually exhumed a lot of bodies, I think like in the 50s or 60s or something like that they determined were, that were vampires believed to be vampires because they, the bodies seemed to have suffered some kind of trauma sometimes months after death. So it's clear that somebody had come and dug them up and done something to the body, cut the head off, cut the heart out, and burned it, which was something that people would do. Sometimes people would cut the heart of a suspected vampire out, and they would burn it, and they would mix the ashes with alcohol or some kind of tonic, maybe snake oil or something like that. And they would feed it to somebody who was sick, hoping that they would get better. It usually didn't work, but
Except for that one time, I think I remember in that lore episode where they did get better, and so they were like, "Oh, this
This is a
works."
cure.
Just because like he gets
Yeah.
better one time doesn't mean drinking the ashes of your family member's heart cures vampirism.
You know, but yeah, it wasn't long before a lot of popular vampire novels started coming out, like Carmilla, Dracula. A lot of those came out in the 1800s within, like, I would say.
What is Carmilla? I don't think I know what that one is.
Lesbian vampires.
Yes. Carmilla.
I've never heard of this.
I have it upstairs.
I think that one came out before Dracula.
It did come out.
That one
And
came out
there's-
in like 1870.
And then there is one more really popular vampire novel that came out before Camilla and Dracula, but I can't for the life of me remember what it's called.
There was one that was just called The Vampire, but it
I
was
think that's
spelled
what
with
it
a
is.
Y.
No, Varney the Vampire.
I
There was
think
one
that's
It's
what
a
it
Feast
is.
of Blood.
There was one that came out, yeah, that was from the 1840s, I think. It was books like that, and Penny Dreadfuls, as they're called, that led to the idea of the aristocrat vampire, which so many people have fallen in love with. But, you know, there's some places in the world where this is still a thing. It's still a very touchy subject
big
for some
superstition.
people. Yeah,
Yeah.
like, you know, very rural areas. We're not opposed to the idea of anything. You know, keep an open mind.
There are people out there that believe they're vampires and have
Yeah.
literally created cults.
Yeah.
And they're like, let's drink blood. So, in that definition, that exists.
That's a great, because like the vampire clan of Murray, Kentucky, with Roderick
Yep,
Farrell.
exactly, that's
back
what I was
in,
thinking of.
1990s, 94, 96 or something. If you've never heard of the Vampire Clan or Roderick Farrell, Murray, Kentucky, just look it up. That's a different video.
It's a hot mess of a bunch of kids believing they're vampires.
And murder.
And murder.
Great.
But a lot of people who believe themselves are vampires today are actually harmless.
Yeah. There's a lot of clubs in LA.
Yeah.
A shit ton of clubs. And there's also like dentists that full out will shave your teeth down and let you get fangs.
Don't you want to do that?
Yes.
I kind of want to do that too.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's
Make
do
a
it.
pact.
Let's make a pact right now. File our teeth down.
Let me be my vampire self.
Oh my gosh.
And in some cases, vampire myths are very similar to just ghost stories. Like, you know, so if you believe in ghosts, hey, you know, who's to say there's not a ghost that, you know, feeds on you while you sleep?
No.
So, you know, who's to say?
So it's a great transition based on what you were talking about the inspiration for Dracula and stuff, because we're going to talk a little bit about Dracula before we talk about all other kinds of vampires and forms of media. There's so many films out there of Dracula. There are so many. There's like Van Helsing. There's Dracula with like, what was the guy that you mentioned? Because
Gary Oldman.
Gary Oldman.
the
With
best.
Winona Ryder as Mina.
Yeah, there's the one I recently rewatched, Bela Lugosi. There's just so many, and when I was looking up, like, I was like, okay, I'm gonna rewatch Dracula. Let's look up Bela Lugosi's Dracula, which came out in 1931, by the way.
Wow, I thought it was older.
It was
I don't know
31.
why I thought it was older.
For some reason, I thought it was younger. I thought it was like 38, maybe.
No,
but
31.
no,
I looked it up
31.
because Bela Lugosi, which that's not his actual name, but he used that as his Hollywood name because it was easier to say because he's Hungarian American. Yeah, but he went by Bela Lugosi. And which was interesting. Before we get into that, did you bring that Bela Lugosi book down? by the
Yeah,
way?
it is right underneath that stack of.
Oh, okay. Before we get into that, as I was rewatching this, I was looking back at some of the actors because this is probably something that to some people it's like, well, yeah, of course, duh. But I'm watching this thing from 1931, and I'm like, all these people are dead. That's weird. All these people are dead.
They could be vampires now.
They could be Bela Lugosi. He was buried in one of the capes from
Yup.
Dracula, one of the costume capes. And people visit his grave to this day. There's one of the most infamous Gothic rock songs that came out during the Gothic rock age of the 80s from Bauhaus is Bela Lugosi's Dead, as a huge homage to him because, of course, Bela Lugosi's performance in that was very inspirational.
Yeah.
And when I was watching it today in like 2020, if you watch it and you've never seen it before, you're just gonna be laughing your ass off because like, as an older movie, it is black and white, There's constant static in the background, which I personally like that, like the white noise in the background. There's little to no soundtrack at all. And that's why it's so funny, because like literally no one will be saying anything. There's no music, but like people will be walking, or like the way that Bela Lugosi looks at you, Dracula.
That crazy look.
That crazed look in his eye.
I have something I want to add to that, because one of my favorite things about that movie is how he'll just be staring at the camera, and there'll be lights, like stage lights, just on his eyes, and he's just staring at you just like this. And there's a shot where Renfield, is sitting in his cell at the mental asylum, and he's looking out the window, and Dracula is across the yard and just staring at him from underneath a tree, and he's not saying anything, but Renfield's like, no, master, I can't. Don't make me! And
oh my god.
Lugosi's just staring at
I'm assuming that's the look that he gives victims when he's trying to mind control them, because he also did that to Lucy in the play or theater that they were at. So in this book, wait, that's kind of it. There's no up close images of that.
There was one that was
kind of up close, but this is, I don't know if the camera can zoom in on that, but this is like, you know, the illustrated Dracula, as Puck has. I found this one. Hey, there you go. There's Bela Lugosi's face. Renfield, I forgot the actor's name, but I looked up all the actors as I was rewatching this, because I was like, oh, these people are dead. Who are they? So first off, that Renfield is arguably, in my opinion, the best Renfield I have seen. Like, his performance from when it starts out with Renfield arriving and he needs to get his carriage ride to Dracula's castle, and he's perfectly normal. By the Friar?
Dwight Fry.
Dwight Fry. Dwight Fry.
Yeah.
There we go. And he's perfectly normal. He's like a nice gentleman, looks perfectly great. And then he sees Dracula, and he's weird. Dracula's just weird. He's like calmly being like, welcome. And he's like slowly moving. He's staring at him.
That reminds me of by Dracula.
He's awkwardly doing things, and Renfield's just like, okay.
Is that not Jonathan?
No, it was Renfield. No,
Renfield?
In the 1931, it starts out with Renfield.
Oh, okay.
It starts with Renfield.
Renfield is supposed to go over and work with Dracula when he comes back to the States.
Yeah.
And the company that both Renfield and Harker work for, she's like, hey, this guy's gone off his rocker. Can you go finish this deal? Because this guy's giving us lots of money for this land.
Right. I couldn't remember how he got exposed to Dracula.
Yeah, he gets crazy.
That's right.
Yeah, and I remember that because he welcomes him in, and then Dracula, which also I love like 30s effects, like I love film and stuff, and like the bat, someone's just up here with this bat just doing this. And there's like this scene where I think it's Lucy. She's like laying down in bed, and it shows the window, and the bat's like doing this, and then it pans to Lucy, and then it pans back, and Bela Lugosi's standing there. Which I love that. But no, yeah, it starts with the Renfield, and then he goes crazy because the vampiresses, like the women, they come out, and then there's another scene that shows Renfield in the mental hospital, like he's gone mad at that point, and I like that because a lot of other stories of Dracula, you get introduced to Renfield when he's already mad, so I like this, and that descent, like he's a great actor.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, that makes me think of Gary Oldman's Dracula, which I love for many reasons. One of which being like when Jonathan first arrives at the castle, and he's talking to Dracula, and he's
so fucking creepy.
He's a feeble old man. He looks like Mr. Burns from The Simpsons.
Yes.
And he's just welcome to the Carpathians, and he come into my home, and he comes in, and but the thing is, like, you'll watch Dracula as he's moving from room to room, and his feet, well, first of all, his legs aren't moving.
No.
He's just like, you don't see his feet moving at all. It's like he's levitating from room to room. But he's wearing this long gown, so it's like you can't see his feet.
Is that the one where he's wearing red?
Yes.
Oh, it's that one.
Yes, that's the one I watched.
Yes, and like you'll see his shadow will start to do things that he's not doing.
Like, I was rewatching it, and like the shadow, they're like, Dracula and Harker are talking, which it's Keanu Reeves, which just
No!
Keanu Reeves is Harker. I was just like,
It's precious.
I forgot about this. Anyways, but they're talking, and you just see Dracula's shadow in the background going with his
my
hands.
God.
Or strangling him,
Yes.
like reaching out and
What?
grabbing his throat. Yeah.
And then he's just so fucking
It's creepy as hell.
I think
love
what killed me was the horrible pause of you'll have to forgive me. I have already eaten. I never drink.
Why?
No, not yet.
The pop.
Not yet.
Anticipation.
Wine. And I was like, can you hold that pause any longer? And then Parker's just like, wow, is that a relative? Like referencing the portrait of young Gary Oldman. You two look so alike. And I'm like,
Does he?
not at all. But yeah, no,
It's a treasure.
it's a hot mess, if anything. Ooh. So I got like halfway through it again. And unfortunately, I stopped like right after the three brides of Dracula go ham on Carter. Like,
Go ham.
go ham on Harker. Like, it was...
Ham on Harker. That's our new like code word. Ham
It's like
on Harker.
Winklers on Barry, hams on Harker.
This one's getting added.
Put that in the list. Ham on Harker.
Ham on Harker.
Oh God.
But it was
Ham.
all kinds of awkward and uncomfortable. But yeah, so like that Dracula, it kind of follows that whole mentality of like just the creepy, just it's odd. Like I was rewatching it, I'm like, what the fuck is going on with Gary Oldman's Dracula? Like, just it was bad.
Oh God. I've never seen that one. That makes me want to watch it.
I
thought
watched
was-
it.
What year
I
did
will
it
watch
come out?
1992.
Okay. I thought it was later.
Nope,
Honestly.
1992. I will rewatch it because it has Winona Ryder and Gary Oldman and Keanu Reeves and Carrie
Hopkins.
Isle. Yeah, Anthony Hopkins.
as Van Helsing.
Yeah.
What?
That was really cool.
Yes, he's in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the whole reason to watch it, but be prepared. Like, it's just a watch.
It's a watch. You
But-
gotta get ready.
But like that just goes to show like there are some things that constantly get dropped. So as Seph brought up earlier, the whole background of Renfield, which the Renfield in that movie is already just like they make him look disheveled and frazzled as fuck.
Picking up spiders off his cell.
Yes, he's literally eating spiders. And just like it's so weird. But yeah, so like they jump straight into that. There's no background whatsoever on why Renfield's completely lost his marbles.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's just cool to see like all the different renditions. And the Renfield of the 1992 Dracula made me think of the Leslie. It is Leslie Nielsen. I was right. Oh, Leslie Nielsen. So he did a version of Dracula where the guy, if you've ever seen Ghostbusters 2, the guy that plays like the little feeble painter in Ghostbusters 2, do you know which guy I'm talking about? The
It's
one
been a
that
hot
gets
minute.
obsessed with the portrait. He plays Renfield, and he like the Renfield of yes, the
He is
Renfield.
Vigo.
Yes, there you go. He plays Vigil in Ghostbusters 2.
The buzzing of flies to him.
But the guy, the way that he portrayed Renfield, the 1992 Renfield, made me think of that ridiculous spin-off Renfield. If that tells you anything,
Oh,
like it
no.
was just that bad and that over the top and that ridiculous. But those are also fun. Like watch the spin-off with Leslie Nielsen. Like Leslie Nielsen is hilarious. And watching a lot of his comedies, like he's what Marlon Wayne, the Wayne brothers did before they got popular. Like that's the kind of mentality.
Ooh, okay. I like
They
that.
make the spin-offs and mock everything.
It's like
Dracula Dead and Love.
Speaking of, yeah, there you go, Dracula Dead and Loving It.
That's
Also,
the
Leslie
one.
Nielsen is in one of the Wayne brothers movies. He's in,
Oh.
I think it's
That makes sense then.
the third one or the fourth one, whichever one features signs.
Okay.
Scary movie.
Sounds
Scary
like
movie.
Mystery Theater 3000 or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. But anyways, so yeah, there's been a lot of renditions of Dracula. It's constantly ever changing. And I know we both were talking about Nosferatu.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
That
Oh,
old school-
Nosferatu! Who's flickering the lights?
Which was apparently kind of it was meant to be heavily inspired by Dracula,
Was
but
it?
clearly non-copyright Dracula.
1922.
The vampire's name is Count Orlok, which is clearly non-copyright Dracula.
Well,
in
I
my
see,
opinion. It's like Great Value Dracula.
Great. So the novel of Dracula came out in 1897. So if Nosferatu came out in 1922, and especially Dracula kicked off a lot of the obsession with vampires nowadays, which I also want to, real quick, before we move on to another subject, is like, I'm wearing this shirt right now, Dracula. And of course it's mirrored because I'm filming myself. Me and Puck usher at this theater downtown, which every year, of course not this year.
No, but they're doing radio plays this year.
They do radio
That's
plays,
cool.
yeah, and other live feeds. But
They're not doing
I love theater, so we usher at this theater downtown, and every year they put on Dracula. And it's slightly different every year. You'd be like, oh, I've already seen it, you know, whatever. But no, they do slight adjustments every year. So this past year, Van Helsing was a woman, and she was amazing. It is really amazing to see live. And that's one of those things where Renfield is always introduced already crazy in the hospital, I'm guessing for time restraints.
Probably.
And, you know, what they can do. But, yeah.
And probably repetitive because everything that happens to Renfield is what happens to Harker anyhow.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like kind of showing, it's almost like foreshadowing to show Renfield already crazed after his interaction with Dracula.
Yeah.
To kind of say, okay, keep your eyes out because it's probably what's going to happen with Harker as he interacts with Dracula. And almost everything that happened to Renfield happens to Harker.
Oh, yeah. But it's a joy to see live if you ever get the chance.
Really
Absolutely. So if unless anyone else has anything else to say about Dracula, I think we can move on to
the resurgence of vampires.
the resurgence. We can talk about Anne Rice a little bit.
Yep.
But first, we gotta start with the Lost Boys.
The Lost Boys.
Ooh.
The classic. The birth of the 80s punk vampire, which is phenomenal, if you ask me.
Was the best.
think every time I hear that song, "Forever Young, I want to be forever."
Oh, I think
young,"
about-
I imagine I don't know. I just
My
imagine
little sister.
that too. But I just imagine, even though that song that I'm talking about doesn't even play in Lost Boys at all, as far as I'm aware. It has to do it has that 80s, you know, like feel to it, and it's just like it makes me think of it makes me think of an 80s vampire movie. You know, it just makes me think of like, you know, it's prom night. And somebody's like, trying to decide. You know, he's trying to decide if he wants to be immortal or not. You know, if he wants to go home with this guy. You know,
Teenage choices.
You know,
Do I become immortal or
teenage
not?
vampire drama. That's good stuff.
Sip that juice.
That would have been a better segue into Twilight.
I know.
We'll get there when we get there.
We'll get to Twilight.
I mean, in a way, we could technically
No,
call this.
let's loop around. Let's go
I was
Twilight.
gonna say, no, we could talk about how fucking Lestat's the biggest drama queen in the world.
Has anybody seen the meme where it's like it's that voice line? I don't remember what it's from, but it's like, "What the hell is that? It's a baby I found in the trash. Well, put it back." And that's Lestat when Louis brings home Claudia. What the hell is that?
Oh my
Put it
gosh.
back. It's not yours.
I will preface this by saying, because we are focusing on the movies, not the books, but I do want to say, drama queens, Lestat versus Marius. If you've read any of the Vampire Chronicles,
Marius
is
so much
in
more.
Blood and Gold, and out of all the Vampire Chronicle novels, Blood and Gold is my favorite. Absolute favorite. It started with Marius, he's the oldest one. He is the bigger drama queen than Lestat, because I think it was like Rome was falling, and Marius didn't like that.
I'm gonna go sleep
For
300
400 years
or something years.
And his like other vampire buddies came in to check, because like Marius used to throw house parties with mortals because he just liked the liveliness that it would form in Rome.
It's such a Rome.
And Rome would fall.
It really is.
And he's like, I can't
Such
throw
a
parties
vampire
anymore.
thing.
I can't throw parties anymore, so I'm just gonna throw a tantrum. I'm just gonna sleep for hundreds
Literal
of years.
tantrum.
And his like vampire buddies are like, hey Marius, you're immortal. You need to wake up or you're gonna like crystallize like one of the two other oldest vampires, like in Queen of the Damned. It was
Fuck if
like,
I
sir,
remember.
I don't, we'll get to that. But like, he's just like, no,
Crystallize.
I'm not ready. So yeah, like there was another story, I forget which one it was, or Lestat, they're talking about Lestat still in his long sleep. Mm-hmm. He did not sleep for as long as Marius
No,
did, so.
no.
But that's how
But
vampires throw tantrums.
he does go like, Louis, you're leaving me here, a child.
No.
Baby I found in the trash.
Here's a baby up in the trash.
Now that we have a child, you must stay with me.
Oh God, mood. But I love Interview with the Vampire so much, though I don't like Anne Rice.
No.
I love the Vampire Chronicles. We can make a video on the great doxing of Anne Rice and how her hatred of fanfiction sparked an entire thing of, I don't own the rights to this fanfiction. No, duh.
Let's get rid of Popeyes.
God. But anyway,
Sorry, that's a whole thing.
there's only 2 movies for Vampire Chronicles. There's the Interview with the Vampire and the Queen of the Damned, right?
Yeah, I thought there was another one.
There might be.
That just kind of like was so bad, people just blocked it out of their memories. Hold on, I'll look it.
Yeah, look it up. But I personally did not like Queen of the Damned.
I hated Queen of the Damned.
I love Interview with the Vampire, and not to say if you like Queen of the Damned, there's nothing wrong with that. But for me personally, it felt too much of like,
There was a TV series.
oh, Queen of the Damned felt like you would buy it at Hot Topic, like that.
No,
It's
you're
the
right.
only DVD that they sell at Hot
It did
Topic.
stop
It's
at
in
Queen
the
of
back
the Damned.
corner.
It did stop.
It's underneath
Yeah.
like a stack of clearance tees somewhere
So-
back there.
Oh,
I
the
was not a
TV
fan.
series is in the making.
Oh,
As of like July 28th, 2020,
oh no!
they're making a TV
It makes me wonder because, like, okay, Interview with the Vampire is such a great book and movie. I love that movie so much. I think it encapsulates like the feeling of the depressed, immoral vampire very well through Louis' perspective.
Yes.
And although in the books Armand is crazy and a redhead, like Armand's character versus book versus movie is very different.
Yeah, Antonio Banderas in there
And-
with his long black
Luxurious
wig.
black hair. Literally, I love, even though I know that's not Armand in the book series, that version
That's
of Armand.
my Armand.
That's
my Armand.
that's my Armand.
And any of you early 2000s babies can remember this one. Who remembers The Little Vampire?
They made a okay, so I remember that
Disney
with
Channel?
Boy.
yeah, it was
I
Disney.
think.
It was a Disney original
Okay.
with Nikki
Jonathan Lipnicki.
Jonathan Lipnicki. They recently
He was in
recently
Stuart- he was
remade
the kid
it.
from Stuart Little.
Okay.
They remade it?
They remade it, but it's all animated now.
I don't know how. Okay.
It's on Netflix.
Okay.
It's all
Hey,
animated.
it doesn't
Listen,
change the original. So
I went to
No.
see that movie probably like 5 or 6
That's
times.
such a
in
good
theaters.
movie. I want to rewatch
Yes,
that now.
and it was interesting because it was like, you know, like it's like, what if the vampires are the real victims here? You know, what
They
if
don't wanna be
like what if they don't want to
vampires?
be vampires? They're cursed and they have to like they have
I
to
don't want to
break
be a
this-
monster.
They have to break the curse, but they can only break the curse every couple of centuries. So they only have one chance because there's a comet that comes around. And for some
Yeah.
reason, the stars have to align just right or something, and they have to do some kind of ritual. And the vampire hunters keep interrupting their ritual.
Yep.
And so,
Vampire cows.
yeah, this kid,
Cows?
this mortal child from America who moves to Scotland for whatever reason, because his dad got a new job or
Yep,
something.
it was a new job.
And they have to, he
He
meets.
falls in love with this little girl vampire.
Yes, and
don't know how
he
long
meets
she's been a
he meets her
vampire.
family. She's probably
We don't
she's
know.
probably centuries old, but yeah, like he meets their family, and it's just the cutest thing ever. And the vampire hunter is just this whack job who's he lives in his truck.
Yeah.
And he and everybody hates him. Like every time he comes into town, like people just drive him out. Like
And
he's just-
vampire cows.
And
he
they
goes
turn-
after the vampire cows.
Tell me about the vampire cows.
So, because this group of vampires does not feed on human blood,
okay.
they feed on animal blood because they're like, why would we want to do that? We don't want to be vampires. So I knew it. But no, so they drink
they don't kill the
cow,
cows
no,
either.
They
They
drink
just
cow
take what they
blood,
need.
but the cows then become vampire cows,
and they can fly.
and they can fly.
Yeah, it's the best thing ever.
But I just want to pop in super quick,
Mm-hmm.
related and unrelated, all at the same time. I find this comedic. You guys may not. But on my vampire book, I just noticed on the back is one of my little sister's diabetic. So this is her blood test strip that's stuck to the back of my vampire book that I just noticed. And I'm like,
What are the odds?
right? I literally just noticed that.
Oh my
Let's
goodness.
put this back over
There we
here.
go. Let's put that.
But yeah, so anyways,
Okay.
what were you gonna say?
I think I was just going to talk about. Oh yeah, we're talking about vampire cows, and that kind of led me. That led me to think about this. Who remembers Bunnicula?
Yes, the Goosebumps series.
Was it a Goosebumps?
It's a Goosebumps series.
Yes, it was about somebody's pet rabbit that turned into a vampire.
Oh, yeah.
Or it was always a vampire when they adopted it, and the
I'm
family
pretty
doesn't
sure
know.
it's
The family has
no, it's a novel series, but there is
Yeah.
a vampire series. Two.
And the family dog, the dogs. There's multiple dogs. Are the only ones who know that the rabbit's a vampire, and they're trying to protect their family. But I don't think Bunnicula's like interested in drinking human blood. Like
No.
he's just a vampire rabbit, and he just does vampire rabbit things.
Oh, I'm thinking there's a vampire poodle in one of the Goosebumps movies.
And the dog, yeah.
The
Likely, very likely.
Yeah, the dogs are the smart ones, and I think it's from the perspective of the dogs.
Wow.
They're like,
Yeah, I
it's
remember
like the humans
Bunnicula.
are all completely unaware, and we have to protect them. That was wild.
Before I continue, I do kind of want to circulate a little bit back more to focus a little bit more on Interview with the Vampire.
Yes.
Specifically the movie, just because I think these aspects are interesting. That, first off, Christian Slater, love him. But the movie, I like how it incorporates the gift that vampires get, where Lestat is saying, read her thoughts. And Louis can't, and Lestat is saying, like, there's a gift that comes either to us all, or sometimes it doesn't come to you at all. And I think that that's not something that every bit of vampire lore or media incorporates. Like with Dracula, he turns into a bat, and I think he turns into a wolf.
He turns
too?
into bats,
Or a dog.
wolves. He turns into black mist. He
Yeah.
can control minds. I think he can read minds too.
Okay, so I think it's interesting that like Dracula was OP like back in the day, and
Yeah.
as he circulated throughout time, the concept of the vampire has had less and less powers. There's been, I'm immortal, I suck blood from humans. That's a constant. And then Anne Rice's vampires, some of them may have a gift, some not. Did Louis have a gift?
I don't think Louis ever had a
No,
gift.
but Lestat could read minds, and I read The Vampire Lestat, one of my other favorite books. I don't remember him having a gift in that one, but I know he had the gift in Interview with the Vampire, specifically the movie. So I think that's interesting. I can't think of other vampire things where it's been like, oh, I can also do this and this and this, like Dracula
I think
can.
honestly, the only thing that pops up, like the idea of dwindling, like just limiting their gifts from turning this overpowered vampire into, minimalizing. That does kind of like segue into Twilight, how they
Yeah.
how they like each vampire has a gift that carries over from their human life
Maybe.
one way or another.
I don't think, segueing into Twilight, I don't think Emmett had a gift.
His
Or-
strength.
His strength?
That was it.
What about Esme?
I don't know what Esme's was. I think like her big thing was her being a mother, because like she.
Really?
Did you ever read the backstory about her?
In Midnight Sun?
I don't think it was. I don't know.
have the book that you
It wasn't
have.
a Midnight Sun. No. So she was sick, and her son was sick, and her son died, and I think her husband died, and Carlisle was the doctor that was caring to all three of them.
Okay,
But because she lost all her family, she's like, I have nothing left, and she committed suicide, and Carlisle saved her.
Okay, so that has to be in the book that you got that
Yeah,
shows
that's the
like
special
extra. So yeah, let's segue into
So like
Twilight.
that motherly instinct
Okay.
is something that came over for Rosalie. It's just, I don't know, because we don't learn much about Rosalie except that she's vain
In this
from
house,
Edward's perspective.
we stan Rosalie.
We love Rosalie.
Team Jasper.
Team.
Oh yes, let's love the
hang
Confederate
on.
soldier.
Wait,
Partner.
hang on. Battle scars.
I'm just saying, Jasper couldn't even stay loyal to the United States.
I
How expect anything from it.
The town of Forks probably thought they were a cult because they were all living together. You have Carlisle and Esme, who clearly are not old enough to have kids,
Yeah.
with these full-grown kids who all happen to live together, be related, and be together. They were probably like, this is a cult, but we don't want to die. We don't want any fruit punch.
I don't want any fruit punch.
No Kool-Aid for me. Thank you.
I'm gonna pop open a nasty boy.
I'm gonna crack open a nasty boy on him.
I know the sparkling was because she was trying to say their skin is so hard, like diamonds. It
Which,
glistens.
honestly, I feel like is a callback to the idea of crystallization.
Yeah.
Which-
Donovan! This is not Rihanna hours.
Sorry. I'm not actually sorry. But
Okay.
But no, I feel like that can definitely be a callback to the idea of crystallization. Because if they crystallize, that means there has to be some component in their body that can crystallize.
yeah.
So it kind of makes sense to some degree. Plus, like in the past, like even in most vampire lore, you can't kill a vampire unless you stake it through the heart and like get rid of its head. Because as soon as you take out the stake, it comes back to life.
Yeah.
So
Get rid of the head.
you're just pinning it to the ground so it can't
exactly.
get up. Yeah.
So it's one of those things where honestly, it does make sense for her to find a way to say, okay, their skin is so hard, which is why they can handle, you know, extreme things, why they can handle extreme cold, heat, why they can handle being hit by a car without shattering. Because I think even in Interview with the Vampire, we don't really see them get hurt that much except by fire and the sun.
The sun, definitely, because they turned to ash. Fire, definitely, and also drinking dead blood.
That. Yeah, and I feel like that's another very common thing that wasn't just in, I think, what else was that in that it was, someone drank dead blood.
Dead blood. Can you recall that?
And it weakened them.
All I know is Lestat.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about. You made me drink dead blood.
Yeah.
Oh, it was supernatural!
Oh, I'm...
Okay.
Tell them because I've never seen
Okay, so
Supernatural.
that's a common thing that's also in Supernatural, like the idea of sun. They were able to come out during the day too in Supernatural.
okay.
It was more like late day kind of thing, so not the sun at its highest. They had to stay in. It was like getting a really, really bad sunburn or third-degree burns kind of thing.
Okay.
But they could come out if the sun was low enough and they had enough blood. I'm sure I'm gonna assume most people know what Supernatural is. Two brothers that travel trying to find their dad, and you know, hilarity ensues. Not really. Lots of paranormal supernatural shit. Thus the name. Anyways, they have one section where they meet up with vampires and they feed, I think they find a way to give them dead blood, or I think if you put dead man's blood on a weapon and you cut them with it, it weakens them.
Ooh. Okay.
So that's another thing that's common in vampire lore, this idea of dead blood, which makes sense. It's dead blood is bad blood.
yeah.
Like there's no nutrients. It's like, never mind, I can't use that comparison because we do it. I was gonna say it's like humans eating dead animals. Oh wait.
Well, okay, when you said they coat like weapons and cut them with dead blood, it made me think about like historically in wartime they would coat swords with literally feces to infect the wound as soon as they
it's just like that.
You remember in Castlevania, the anime
Castlevania!
where Trevor is telling townspeople, coat your weapons in salt.
Yeah,
Like, rub them with
salt's
salt.
another really common
and
thing.
He told
Yeah.
the
As
priests,
protection.
he told the priests, go and churn out as much holy water as you possibly can.
Yeah.
But then again, they were fighting demons and hellspawn and whatnot. But still,
Yeah, which is another interesting thing. Twilight's one of the few ones that has like a church where like
The Volturi?
yeah, where you know vampires can go. Like the idea of vampires can't like enter a home without permission, can't enter onto sacred ground, kind of thing.
Yeah.
something else that I kind of want to bring up. The video game Vampire or Vampire.
Yeah, I figured we were going to talk
because
about
a lot of this comes up in that as well, because crosses can be used against vampires to harm them, but it has to be wielded with intention. So it's like, if a vampire sees a cross, it's not gonna, it has to be wielded, like, by somebody holding it up against them. But vampires still can't seem to enter a church, but it's unclear as to why. And the main characters often talk about this, and there's a couple dialogue points where it's like, why can't I walk into a church? It's just like this feeling that I get. And, you know, I think one of the doctors says, well, there's a theory that it might be personal guilt. Maybe it's your own thoughts, your own subconscious that keeps you from entering that church because of the things that you've done against your will. Things like that. So it's interesting to think about religious symbols as wards against vampires, because it's like, you know, it's like I think it all comes back to intention.
See, and honestly, that kind of makes me think of going back to Twilight, like jumping back there. Edward has this concept that he has been damned because of being a vampire, like his soul has been at stake. So one thing that I recently learned, because I watch a lot of urban exploration, but when churches are abandoned, a lot of the times they will take their sacred object with them. So maybe like the thing that stops vampires from being able to enter, it's not the ground itself that's necessarily sacred, it's the object that's kind of like creates a barrier. And if their soul is damned, it would make sense for a damned being not to be able to come in a certain proximity of that sacred object.
Because there are a lot of churches out there in the world that claim to have holy relics or the bones of saints, you know, things like that. Like, I think
I feel like that's bad.
I know, like there's a church in France, I think, somewhere where somebody claims to have a piece of the crown of thorns or something like that. Or there's churches in the Middle East, I think, where they claim to have like
some of the burning bush.
Well, maybe, or like a piece of the actual cross that Christ was crucified on.
I wouldn't be surprised with that, honestly.
Or or the nails that he was nailed to the cross with, or like the bones of like some martyr who was killed on those grounds or something like that. And so, you know, or the Holy Grail. You know, we go back to the myth of the Holy Grail as well. That's the whole thing. But the idea of holy relics.
Yeah, so I think that's really neat. And something that popped into my head, there's very big genres. Like, there are some huge genres of vampires. We have like the traditional vampire where Dracula falls into. Then we have like the modernized version where we have Twilight, where they kind of branched out on their own. But in between those two, we have like the 80s vampire. Then you have like the dark underworld with Kate Beckinsale and Blade, like those types of vampires falling in. And even more, you have like the TV series where you have
Vampire Diaries, True Blood.
Vampire Diaries, True Blood. Again, Supernatural pops up. Like there's a bunch of vampire TV series, and like just there's a bunch of different genres where each person has taken it. So you have like the aristocracy and, you know, dramatics of Interview with a Vampire. Then you have like the teenage drama of a lot of these. But it's really neat to see how each author or creator kind of takes this overarching conceived hold on, sorry.
Conceived what?
No, conceived myth. I was just thinking, okay, there's a Wikipedia page about my brain. Wikipedia page about vampire weaknesses, and one of them is milk. Why? Because Count Chocula. Anyways.
So we're seeing vampires now integrate their way into Syria.
Yes, like vampires are like, you have this, vampires are everywhere, but almost the reoccurring theme, save for a few, vampires are sexy.
There's always an accent involved with a lot of vampires.
And the Count from Sesame Street. One,
two, three. The fucking Count from Sesame Street. That's
like,
right.
But even still, like, he is modeled after Bela Lugosi's vampire.
He is, yeah.
He wears the cape that's black on the outside, red on the inside, has the widow's peak hair,
the high collar,
and he has that accent as well.
Which I'll mention briefly, yeah, it's not a movie, but we're going to talk about Castlevania real quick, where
Yes.
Castlevania is, there are so many games in Castlevania, so much so to the point where they were like, there's so many games that at this point our timeline doesn't make sense. So then they came out with a spin-out series of Lords of Shadow, which I think it's a trilogy. I think there's 3 games of Lords of Shadow. And then the Netflix series of Castlevania, which is loosely based off of all of its previous content, but also having its own, thing.
Plot, storyline kind of thing.
Yeah,
elements.
I think Alucard is a prevalent playable character in which Castlevania game was it? It was
Symphony of the Night.
Symphony of the Night, which he can turn into a wolf in Symphony of the Night. And always in Castlevania, Dracula is the villain, which you fight against. And even then, Dracula, he doesn't look like Bela Lugosi. He doesn't look like any of this other stuff.
No.
He looks like this other thing. But he looks like when you would read like a novel like Dracula or something like that, he looks like the embodiment of what you would expect, I think.
Honestly,
I think
he makes me think of Gary Oldman's Dracula.
Yeah.
I think he appears to be Vlad Tepes. Like, he looks like Vlad the Impaler, but like, in my opinion, like a more handsome,
More
version.
handsome.
Like, I mean, like, 'cause
I
if
get
you
that.
look
No,
at,
I do get that.
yeah, if you look at paintings of Vlad the Impaler, like,
Yeah.
he's got that long, dark,
Yeah.
curly hair, and he's got that mustache
Gary
and beard.
Oldman's,
Yeah.
like his updated Dracula, definitely makes me feel like that.
It was-
Because he has that wavy hair.
Vlad Tepes.
It was Vlad Tepes.
Yeah.
Vlad Tepes Dracula.
And therefore, it is directly related to Vlad the Impaler because Dracula and Alucard, their last names are Tepes.
Yeah.
So, wow.
Because Vlad the Impaler's father's name was Vlad Dracul, which
Yeah.
I think is Vlad the Dragon.
Yeah,
'Cause he was a member of the Order
their
of the
symbols.
Dragon.
Well, it's not just that. The Dracul, the Dracula family, their symbol is dragons.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Vlad Dracula would be
See, like
Vlad's son
that's
of
Gary
the dragon.
Oldman's Dracula. So, like, if you take off the top
Kinda looks
hat and
like
the
Ozzy
glasses,
He looks like Johnny Depp!
he does.
How do you all feel about feral vampires? Because there's the image
Define
of the
feral.
like, think about the image of like the aristocrat vampire, like
Okay.
like Dracula or even like Nosferatu, even how creepy he is and all that stuff. But then there's also the feral vampire. Think like 30 Days of Night, where it's like they're more animalistic than anything. Like
I like them.
they're not well dressed and I'm here to seduce you. They're like, I'm gonna corner you in an alleyway and tear your throat out type of crackhead vampires. like yeah.
Crackhead vampire.
I'm a fan of
They probably
Yeah.
are like the crackheads of the vampire community.
yeah, like in
God, okay.
in Vampire in the game. There's
Yeah.
feral vampires that are
Just
called
basic
skulls.
instinct. Yeah.
And which is funny because the author of this book here is David J. Skull.
Oh, that's interesting.
So,
I wonder if that's a callback.
I don't know, but yeah, there's always this idea of feral vampires. If you're a fan of the Witcher series as well,
Okay.
there's different kinds of vampires. You have the higher vampires, which are very passable for humans, but they're not. But then you have like the kind of lesser vampires, like the ones that kind of just look like mutated bat creatures that live in caves and
Oh, yeah.
That makes me think of
Yeah.
like the Underworld series, but also the Van Helsing movie with Hugh Jackman. Like those
Oh, yeah.
vampires
Yeah.
are very like more bat humans than in
Like
they're the
morphs.
literal man bat instead of Batman.
Yeah, I love the distinction. I love the idea of a vampire hierarchy.
Okay.
That there are some that are like more
I definitely see that as a
base and just
possibility.
feral and just wild. and
Honestly,
there's
in
ones
my
that-
mind, it would make more sense as the older they get, the more animalistic they
Mm-hmm.
become.
Or
Yeah, that
or
makes sense.
you could even say like the younger they are because like they haven't received proper guidance. Like think like a vampire who's just savagely attacked and just like left to die.
I mean, that
And
makes
then-
sense. That's like
and then gets
going
up.
back to Twilight. That's the newborns in Twilight,
Yeah.
where they haven't had any guidance. All they know is that bloodlust, and they don't even think, "Oh, hey, I was once a person. These are people. No, I'm thirsty. Let me kill."
Yeah, the animalistic instinct takes over. So, yeah.
And I just think 30 Days of Night is a good example of that.
Yeah,
'cause it's like,
and that's a whole different rendition. Like, that is literally the idea of vampires that sleep in coffins, don't come out during the sun at
Yeah.
all. Like, and they have that very gaunt look about them. None of them look human. They have like those sclera eyes. Kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just
it's all people.
it's all
It always was.
like a nocturnal animal, because
Yeah.
like think about like possums or like any other kind of animal that comes out at night. You know, their eyes are all pupil, right? Like it's their eyes are totally black to just let in as much light as possible. Which
That
I think
makes
is an
sense,
interesting
yeah.
evolutionary trait.
I don't know. It's also one of the things where, like, I wonder if that seclusion, the same way that if you were to keep a person, you know, there's a movie out there where they throw this vegan or vegetarian into a cell and they put a dead body in there with her and she gets no food, no water, and they see how long it takes until she eats that body.
Well, pretty soon that body's going to start to smell and taste really bad.
That's what happened though, but like it had been so long that she finally succumbed and ate it. Yeah.
So at this point, we're gonna wrap this up real quick. So do any of us have final thoughts on the vampire in media, specifically, if you would like to say?
In media.
I'll just repeat what I said. I like how there's different genres, essentially, of vampires, how each creator has kind of taken this archetype and elaborated on it and tweaked it to create their own archetype that we can all still recognize and influences our portrayal of vampires.
Yeah.
Depending on what we've been exposed to, and how vampires, even though people talk about like Twilight was the resurgence, but honestly, like vampires are still heavily prevalent in our media and have not, and probably will not disappear. It's that mystery, it's the idea of clinging to that immortality, it's the idea of, you know, this thing that we can't let go of.
Absolutely.
And it's the idea of being seduced as well by something that's it's very, very powerful,
Dark
and
mystery.
very, mysterious and whatnot. Nobody's afraid of being seduced.
Maybe. Who knows?
Werewolves
Maybe.
are a different story. We'll cover those in another
That's a
video.
later video.
That's a whole
We
other
can talk
thing.
about my high school experience.
We'll talk about that. Well, for werewolves.
Well,
So anyway, if you like
Coming soon to a
videos,
theater near you.
if you like videos like this one, we'll be doing many more in the future. So stay tuned. You can let us know by giving us a comment below, giving us a thumbs up. In the description below, I'll be putting on all of our handles for Instagram. You're welcome to reach out to us or follow us. So once again, my name is Seph.
I'm Puck.
Donovan, what's up?
Sounds like a question. Donovan?
That's
And
me.
this is Anthus Lavinthe Creations, so thank you very much for joining us.
We hope you enjoyed.
Happy Halloween, bye-bye!
Oh.